people are willing to read,
Right.
it's not enough. It's not enough to get people don't really understand. They don't have the level of background and the depth of expertise that has taken an enormous amount of time to cultivate. So then the criticism that comes and the backlash you get from your distilled soundbite that people are willing to read,
Right.
is how do you handle that?
I think that as long as you control the message of what things are spent for, and you have your government media people, I mean, let's all be honest, that this is going out there, but you have to have spin on everything now. And being transparent of saying, yeah, we spent $48,000 in meals in this 2-year period, but it was for meetings for a $1 billion project, apples and oranges. I mean, you're still going to have to explain that away. Because if you don't put it out there at all, then you just have the speculators. And if you put it out there, then at least it lets people form an opinion. But I think that you have to kind of, cross the good with the bad and just say, if you're willing to be that transparent and just say, yeah, here's where the money went, explain where it went. Or shut it down tight and don't let anybody know. But I still think that the former is the better option. The other thing is, and I have a different view on this, having shifted roles this last time. Not working directly with the tribal government except for, just occasional advising, but not having a formal role, and then shifting to being dean of a law school. And now, everything that happens in that law school, whether it's somebody spilling a cup of coffee on that carpet, has a message and a brand, and how you deal with things. It's silly, but outside perceptions and what people think of a place will drive serious things for you. And one of the things that I've been having to wrap my mind around, but then think about how we do that, is the state of Arkansas has the most liberal FOIA, Freedom of Information Act laws, of any state in the country. So any Joe Schmo in Arkansas can send a FOIA request and say, I want to see the dean's emails between this person and this person about X. And they're fair game. Now, it might take 3 months to get them there, but everyone operates in this transparency mode of, if you need to have a conversation about something confidential, then do it the old-fashioned way and pick up the phone and talk to somebody, because everything we do is transparent for the people. Now, it's a hassle, and we have one attorney at the university who does nothing but take these FOIA requests. And, is this a legitimate one, or is it something that truly is protected information like student records or health records? I mean, there's reasons that for people's privacy, you don't let some records out there. But when it comes to how state money got spent, people in the state of Arkansas say, yeah, I get a right to see how state money got spent. And it, I think, engenders a whole lot of faith in the system. And, one thing they just implemented is, to cut down on the administrative piece of it, they just put a database up, and every state dollar that gets spent on travel and big expenditures, so something maybe over $5,000 or $10,000, goes into this searchable database, and people can just go in there and play around. And on one hand, gosh, why do they need that information? But on the other hand, now we don't even have to have somebody responding to their request, because you can just hit reply and send them this link, and anything they want to take a look at is there. And, I think that there's some real buy-in and accountability that goes from that, because nothing's hidden. It's just all out there for everybody to see. We're getting a little shorter on time, so I'm going to go on into a couple of other things. And this is the details of how you might do this. One thing in terms of your demographic realities that I think is helpful is that you still have a small enough constituency base of tribal citizens that it's attainable for you all to actually reach out to everybody in some form. Now, how do you define who your group that you're going to reach out to is probably a larger discussion, because it can no longer, in our world, just be tribal members, or you're going to have your head in the sand, because all of the people in this part of the state that are economically impacted are going to want to have some information. But there's also some information that you're going to decide that only your tribal members get. And so there's the question of what is public in that anybody searching around can find it, versus what is semi-private, meaning sometimes there might be a closed board or some sort of password protected type thing, or the types of things that you would actually mail out versus put on a website. But I do think that you have a much easier process, even if they live all around the globe, the 75% that aren't local, in having meaningful dialogue, because you're still dealing with such few relative number of people. But you're going to have some challenges about how you do that, and I think that the idea that you could just put something up on a website is almost at this point as dinosaur as we can send out a newspaper or a newsletter, because people might go there, but they might find it easier to engage in other platforms. And so in another slide, I've got social media, this kind of thing to think about. But a couple of the points about the why, and then we'll get into the how you do this, is like I've talked about, if you can get more people engaged, you have a stronger base of people that constitute the you versus them. And so when you get these additional outside pressures, and when I say the you versus them, if you effectively communicate to this whole region about all the positive things happening in this tribe, and the true economic impact on the state and on the region because you're here, then the next time you get into one of these sovereignty situations with external forces, you control the you versus them, meaning that you intentionally make the people who you're interacting with a broader community than just your tribal members, because that is going to set you back up better next time that there's some sort of a political wind that you need allies. The other is that I really do think that it promotes efficiency in the government by just being transparent about things. Because if you do have those outliers that are just constantly hitting you up for information, right? And if you do have some sort of a Freedom of Information or an Open Meetings Act where you've scratched the surface to allow the questions, but then you haven't put together the process and the infrastructure for getting the information out, you really could be eaten alive with manpower and womanpower labor requirements to accomplish this. And then if you have it on the books that you're going to provide this information and you don't, or it takes months and months and months, that can set you back the complete opposite way, because even though you are with good intention legitimately trying to get the information out, it looks like you're hiding something. And so putting mechanisms in where you have a clear idea of what is public content or content that you're willing to have tribal members see, and then just automatically getting it out there, it makes it a whole lot more efficient than making them come with a request. And I do think, like the example I talked about with the travel, I do think that you see quick notions of accountability, because whether they even ever click on a database of that kind, or whether they ever go to a page where you've posted this stuff, the fact that it's there is the big thing. You probably will see a major uptick in the first month or two by just curious people poking around to see what they can find. And then after that, your hits are going to go way down, and people aren't going to be logging on there once a month necessarily to see what's going on. But there's the perception that it's all out there and available if I want to see it, so it all must be in the up and up. And so that just makes it better to how they think about the government. And then I think that you will find increased participation in some ways. I mean, it's not going to be through the roof that you're going to next election get 75% more voters, than you do this time. But in terms of your problem of not being able to ever get a quorum and those kinds of things, I think those could be the baby steps that lead to that other engagement with the government. So the types of engagement that you might consider. The Open Meetings Act thing is the easy one, right? We are going to publicly put it out there that we're having this meeting and here's what we're going to talk about, and we're stuck with that agenda absent some extraordinary circumstance. Everyone has adequate notice that this is taking place, and you stick to it. Now, that's the easy piece. the defining what goes into open meetings versus when you have to have closed ones, that's the hard part, right? And clear boundaries that tribes have adopted and local governments have these. I mean, it's not reinventing the wheel, but obviously when you talk about personnel problems and economic development, finance, that kind of things, you have a similar act. How liberal is it?
In terms of what you do in closed session?
Yeah, when can you do a closed session? Is it frequently used, or would that be the exception?
It's used at least once a meeting right now.
I would say
For
that
personnel?
it's frequently
Yeah.
used, but it's only for limited types of things. And we certainly, I think council does a good job of questioning whether this needs to be in closed session or not, opposed to the automatic that it should be in closed session.
Confidential legal issues, personnel issues, confidential business discussions.
Do tribal members come to your council meetings? Yeah.
Not a lot.
What?
Depends on the topic.
Yeah.
Typically not a lot.
You know, and open meetings usually in the traditional sense just means post it and you have a physical meeting and somebody could come to that room. But then there's open meetings in the real sense. If 75% of your tribal members don't live here locally, they're not coming to the meetings. And so then it begs the next question of live streaming your council meetings on the internet. Now, our tribe did this about 3 or 4 years ago, and then they archive them, and they're on the website, so then you can go in there and do it. Now, from the outliers and the people who now, instead of blogs, have Facebook pages, it's the most comical thing in the world because there's live blogging of what's going on in the council meeting. And so, you know, so-and-so's checking her iPhone again. What is she doing? Who is she talking to? You know, the typical thing that's just human nature that goes on. But you can also see how putting that on the internet, even if one person watches it, it increases the people that are engaged. But then you get some banter where it almost becomes a social thing. I was on one a couple of weeks ago because I was in a hotel room and they were having a council meeting, and I thought, well, let me go ahead and do that. So I had the council meeting up on my laptop watching that, and it comes through a little bit grainy, but it's about YouTube quality, maybe a slight delay if your internet connection is not that good. But then on my iPad, I had the Facebook page up where they were talking about what was going on in the meeting. And there were 300 plus people in that Facebook room commenting on what's going on, right? And again, a lot of it was completely juvenile. But you had 300 people who would never physically be able to come to that meeting that were setting all over the United States, and one military guy overseas that was on there. And it might digress to where people aren't even talking about what's going on in the council meeting, but people are engaging with each other. And I think that that's really something to consider. You've got the technology, it costs almost nothing. But you have to also be aware of the combat of what are they trying to hide, right? Because then when it would go in executive session, then the video feed goes blank and there's just a standard standby kind of thing. And then the chat room fires up. What are they doing? What are they talking about? But you've got people plugged in for the first time in a really long time. And so I just think that that's positive. If you're operating on the assumption that you don't mind your tribal member coming and sitting in the back of the room, then why not just put it out there for everybody on the internet? Yeah.
I mean, we've been talking about streaming it for 10 years now, I think. But, you know, the one experience that we have, there's actually a blog that's not controlled by the tribal government, by a tribe, I think it's run by a tribal elder, that we've already had this kind of experience with it. It's funny because it's in a lot of ways similar to the one that you described. And it's been, and from, you know, the hard part about it is I agree with you. I had envisioned this blog myself before it ever went up. I thought how great it'll be great to, you know, get students that are off in school involved, and what it turns into is just this really nasty
Vicious
rumor
Yeah.
forum where people are saying things like they're the truth,
Right.
and they're absolutely not the truth. I mean,
Yeah.
just misinformed.
But then if you've got this other stuff out there, then, you know, what I've seen too is you get the nasty, nasty biting comments. I mean, that's just, people are going to do that. But then when somebody said, oh, so-and-so did that, well, you've got both political factions on there. And now that there's all of this other stuff in conjunction with the blog, with the video, then somebody will say, well, actually, they didn't go there. Here it is. And they'll paste a link into it. And then, you know, you've got people hitting all of those different sites. And so I think you can't just have one by itself. You got to have all of that merged together so that the information is actually there. Or, yeah, you open it up and you get that kind of stuff. But, you know, the other thing is, to what extent the tribal government plays a role in that. And in a previous slide, I asked that open question of should a tribal official